Good evening, bonsoir, konnichiwa. Welcome to the 28th Rendezvous with Madness Festival. My name is Scott Miller-Berry. I'm Managing Director at Workman Arts, presenters of Rendezvous with Madness, and I'm a member of the Film Programming Committee. Welcome to the discussion for the documentary 48 Years, Silent Dictator by Hiroshi Sonari. We're very grateful to be joined by the director, Hiroshi. Our moderator tonight is Amina Mohamed, who works with the Prisoners with HIV/AIDS Support Action Network. And we're grateful for the presence of James Ruston from the Toronto Prisoners' Rights Project. Thanks also to our ASL interpreter, Ryan, and to our live captioner, Don. We would like to acknowledge the Indigenous lands on which we're presently located. Toronto comes from the Mohawk word Tikaranto, which can be loosely translated as where the trees meet the water. It's part of the traditional territories of many nations, the Huron-Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Rendezvous with Madness recognizes this is an ongoing dialogue, and an acknowledgement is simply that, just an acknowledgement. The work is ongoing, and we are very grateful to live and work on this land with all people, those indigenous to Turtle Island, and those from all over the world. Rendezvous with Madness values inclusivity, anti-oppression, and safety at all levels. Everyone has a role to play to maintain that spirit. We invite you to visit our statement and code of conduct on our website at workmanarts.com and ensure that you are treating everyone tonight with respect. We'd like to thank our co-presenters for tonight's program, the Toronto Prisoners' Rights Project and the Images Festival. We'd also like to thank Sohrab Hura, who made the short film Bittersweet that screened alongside 48 Years, Silent Dictator. Some very quick notes about how to ask questions tonight during the discussion. If you'd like to ask a question, please type first your name and then any question or comment into the chat box on the upper right-hand side of your screen. Tonight's discussion is held in English with simultaneous ASL interpretation and live captioning. Our moderator will choose the questions for the panel, and we do apologize in advance if we're not able to get to every question within the allotted time, which is approximately 30 to 45 minutes. Tonight we have an active listener joining us, Kat. There's Kat. If you would like to step off the call for any reason, require someone to chat with, you can get in touch with Kat directly. Telephone number is 647-474-2338, or by email at katrissing@gmail.com. Kat's contact information is also on the Rendezvous webpage for 48 Years in the black box on the right. Rendezvous always values making time to discuss difficult content, but we also respect that you'll know your own limits and you'll seek out any supports that you might need should you require it. And now I'm really thrilled to turn things over to our moderator tonight, Amina Mohamed, to introduce the panel. Thank you, enjoy.
Hi everyone, thank you. So tonight our two panelists are the director, Hiroshi Sonari, and James Ruston. And so I have just a couple of questions for the two of you, and then we can go into the Q&A questions. So I'll start with Hiroshi. Hi. Thank you for that film. It was really beautiful. So I was wondering, what was your experience documenting the life of Iwao Hakamada, and what drew you to his story?
So I learned about him in 2014. It was from New York Times. So I live in New York, even though I'm from Japan. So I didn't know anything about Iwao until 2014, until the New York Times article where it said Iwao just got released. It's a temporary release. At the same time, he has a severe prison psychosis. So this, first of all, he was in solitary for 48 years. That was just unbelievable. But then this prison psychosis, I became very interested. And I actually wanted to in some ways experience it myself, to think and to analyze, because I read a lot of psychoanalysis and psychology stuff. So I just became interested in psyche. So this made me want to approach him, and that's how it started.
And yeah, that kind of leads into my second question, which is that like I really appreciated the way that you worked with Iwao. I like part of my job is also working with folks experiencing mental health crises or psychosis, and so I know that there's a lot of difficulty in navigating conversations sometimes, and you were really empathetic about his beliefs and validated his experiences. And so you just said that you're interested in psychology and psychoanalysis. So do you have any experience working with individuals experiencing psychosis before this? And yeah.
Not exactly in a professional level, but I am also an art teacher. So I do a lot of talking with the artists who manifest strong personalities. And in our discussion, oftentimes it becomes a little bit like a therapy also. And then there I usually walk into the individual's like strength and then also the weakness, and I try to fix those things, like or I try to provoke those elements in the personality. So I guess I'm very used to kind of walking into people's mind.
Mm-hmm. And do you think there's any, what do you think is important for people or other filmmakers to know about working with people experiencing psychosis or a mental health crisis?
Well, with the case, with Iwao's case, it was basically, I learned as I went. So is this working right now?
It might be frozen.
Can you try speaking, Hiroshi?
I'm sure it'll be back any moment.
Yeah, it's how these things go.
Maybe James, if you'd care to share your thoughts about the film, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I can definitely relate to the experience. To give you a little bit of my background, I've been serving a life sentence for the past 31 years, and so I've spent about 26 of those years locked in one or another prison cell in Canada. And so I could relate to that long-term disconnection from the community that Iwao experienced. I think it's fascinating that he was able to survive through that experience. And it's obviously very sad and troubling that he has come out with this psychosis, and that's apparent throughout the film with his somewhat detached reality. And though it's interesting that he had to, in order to survive, it seems, to detach from that reality and create this other world that was acceptable for him to live in. And I can speak to my experience in seeing people have that disconnect experience happen, have that psychosis. Normally it doesn't, from what I've seen, it isn't as permanent. Of course, a few of the people I've seen with it have gone through the length of time that Iwao did, particularly in most of it in solitary confinement, which we know has been designated as torture. And the fact that it still continues to this day, even in Canada, we see prisoners being locked up in solitary confinement, most recently due to the COVID circumstances. And unfortunately, once you're in that system behind those walls, there isn't a lot of accountability as far as prisoners' health or mental health. And so I think that's why we see this effect on Iwao. And I just can't imagine, particularly in his circumstance when he wasn't even guilty. I know it's difficult enough for human beings who have made choices in their life that have led them to be convicted and sentenced to long periods of time like myself. I take responsibility for the behavior that I engaged in when I was a youth. And I served and I accepted that I had this punishment to pay. And so it's difficult to conceive how someone could justify their life living for 48 years in a prison cell and almost all in solitary confinement for something that you haven't even done. I think there's a struggle going on in talking with Hiroshi that the government is still resisting compensating Iwao for that time. And I think it's a real sad state of affairs when someone is victimized as he was. And even through all of this, he's survived. His family have survived, although early on, I believe his wife and child abandoned him. And eventually he himself just decided not to connect with the community, because that's something I can also speak to, is when you have this artificial disconnect that is imposed upon you, and the terms of your relationships are made by other authorities that have no interest in your mental health or in your emotional health, it can take quite a toll just maintaining those relationships. And so you see that a lot in people, not just in the community, becoming exhausted with the lengthy process that they have to go through, but also the prisoners and the emotional strain that it puts on them, as well as the families. And so people often find it easier just to disconnect and, as Iwao did, find his own reality and create his own reality. Yeah, it's that we're still doing this in the world today, that we're still treating people practically as animals and locking them in cages, as if, after 4, 5, 6 years, there's any chance that somebody is that same person that they were in the moment of whatever offense that they've committed, that we continue to hold them for 20, 30. I've seen guys that are still inside after 40 plus years for something they did when they were teenagers. And I think it's appalling. And we see the consequences of it in Iwao and his mental health. And thankfully he has a family, his sister, who's loves him still and cares for him, and have no doubt as well. And I can speak to the value of family contact and just how important those relationships are. That's definitely something that sustained Iwao, and that's I think the number one factor for people who are rehabilitating after sentences in prison is family contact. And so, yeah, I think second is education. And, these are two aspects of our prison culture around the world that are really neglected. In Canada, we've seen a real drastic decrease in the and they're allowed to stay for 6 or 7 hours. And if you look nowadays at most institutions, you're being limited to an hour and a half for one day. And people typically travel 3, 4, or 5 hours to go and visit their family, and then you barely get an hour and a half to reconnect. And it's in these kind of sanitized visiting rooms with it's not very many comforts. And yeah, I can't imagine. I'm fascinated by the story that Iwao survived, and that I'm glad that Hiroshi did make this movie. And I see he's back now. And
yeah, so he's back. Could you quickly just summarize your response for Hiroshi?
There's so much to talk about. I just think it's amazing how you were able, one, to get through some of the psychosis that Iwao had, and give us a look into his experience that just must have been, that was obviously so daunting that he couldn't even hold on to that reality. And it's a miracle, I think, that he survived, and it's grace that he has his family, his sister, and as well that you made this film so that people can see what resilience is and what, you know, what's really important to people. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, wait, so you want me to respond to this? How?
No, I think because you missed James, so I think we were just gonna giving you a summary of what he had said.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah. So we do have our first question from the audience for you, Hiroshi.
Okay.
So it's from Dave from Toronto. So he says, thank you, Hiroshi, for an amazing film. At first, Iwao seemed to sense when answering your questions, but as time went on, and especially at the time, it seemed, I guess, to mainly be his psychosis, especially with his sister saying that's his world. Did you get a feeling about what Iwao was saying was true or made up?
Actually, like interviewing Iwao was like just learning as it goes. So in the beginning, I had no idea what he was talking about, but towards the end of the first day, I was starting to see the world a little bit, a glimpse of it. And by the second and third day, I was also learning how he speaks. So because I would ask questions and he can talk for 30 minutes to 1 hour with just one question. He can just bring everything together, go all over the place. And so what I learned to do was also, I would insert questions while he's talking and don't let him go on too long. And then I would also rephrase what he said with myself. Then he would start to agree with me. Then like this seemed to spark a conversation a little bit. So by the second day, I kind of knew how to navigate him while I was trying to ask questions. Then by the third day, I was starting to feel emotions. So I wanted to make my film kind of truthful to how I experience things. So in a way, like in the beginning, it's a long, confusing battle, and then like you start to glimpse in, and basically this is how I felt while I was making this film.
And how long did you work with him to make the film?
So basically the interview, the intense interview for 3 days and then 3 hours each. So I shot about 9 hours of interview with him. And I think that's why it was kind of good that I would do it for a long time. And then I was one of the first people who was actually interested in hearing him. Because he's so nonsensical, even though he became sort of like a media star, the TV would come, but they're not so interested in his psychosis. They'd rather they want to hear more like I was suffering in the prison, like something that people are familiar, and then something that's easier to package. But because I was so interested in his talk, he was actually he was happy to share that with me.
Mm-hmm. And are you still connected to him now? Like, has he seen the film or the final?
Yeah, he's seen the film. He saw a beginning, 15 minutes, and then he finished watching. His sister, and then all the people who works with him. Like, there's a group of people who are volunteers to help his daily needs, and because he takes a walk. It could be dangerous. And then one time he, I guess, stole or he just took someone's milk that was left at the door, like the milk delivery. So they want to be careful with his public appearance and his mannerism. So there are people who, and then they all watched it and they really like it very much because this is the only time where they can sit down and really listen to him to the end.
Mm-hmm. And that group of people, they have been working with him since he was released, and they've sort of created like a circle of care for him and are taking care of him as a community.
Yeah, taking care of him and then taking care of Hideko too, because Hideko is also an elder woman.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Has there been any developments around capital punishment since his release?
No, actually, on the contrary, his retrial was denied. This was last year, and it was a big, big news. So it doesn't seem to be going any better for his prospect, for his life, as well as I guess, the Japanese court in general.
Mm-hmm. And is there anything that you learned from like working with him that you would like other filmmakers to know about working with people experiencing psychosis or people who have been incarcerated? Are there any things that you would like other filmmakers to know about doing this work?
I think you just have to kind of listen and then gain a perspective through listening. And I think that was one thing that even though I was aggressively asking questions, but I was like receiving everything and learning the shape and then kind of sculpting who he was in my mind. And so I think being a good listener would be, I think, something that I would say.
And James, is there anything you would like to add to that as somebody who's been incarcerated? Is there anything you would like people to know that want to do work or make films about people with that experience?
Yeah, well, I think it's important, just like Hiroshi said there, to listen to people. And I would say also that that's part of connecting with them. And I think that's a really critical piece that's missing in when we incarcerate someone, is it's actually the opposite. We disconnect them from society, and people get into this pattern of thinking as if they're disconnected, and so it becomes more difficult, particularly after longer periods of time when someone is released and they're reintegrating back into community. So anyone I would suggest working with them it benefits not just listening, but also sharing somewhat of your personal self that allows the person to know that you trust them. I think that's the easiest way to garner trust from someone, is to trust them, and then they will in turn trust you. And that's probably pretty important when you're making a film documentary about someone's life. You want to get the details. I wonder, Hiroshi, if there was any change in him, like if you spoke to him before the camera, or then when the camera was on or the camera was off? We see all of what was on the camera, and I wonder if there was anything different outside of that.
It's completely the same.
Flat, eh? Okay.
He's just like that.
Did he have a sense, do you think, that he was being filmed?
Oh yeah, he knew.
Okay.
And then he enjoyed the fact that I would come with a camera, set it up, and then put a microphone on him, and then I think it made him feel good.
Right. That attention, maybe.
Yeah, the full attention.
Right. Cool.
We have another question from the audience for Hiroshi. So thank you for the beautiful film. Along with the last question, I think it's remarkable you didn't intervene with Iwao when he was recounting his memories and presence. My question is, the music is such a big part of the film and felt like a counterpoint to Iwao's inner world. Can you talk about the music decisions for the film?
Yeah, so basically, this is the music by Arto Lindsay, who's my good friend in New York. I've always been a big fan of Arto's noise. And Arto Lindsay is a musician who plays noise. And then he has composed a lot of music through noise. And he's completely self-taught. He not only makes his own music, but he also produces music too. He produces other musicians, famous people like Caetano Veloso and whatnot. But this all on his own. There was no theory, no school that he went to. And in some ways, this mastery of one's, I guess, like in this case, noise, mastery of noise, is a situation is a bit similar to Iwao, where he has created this complete world within himself with his own words and then with his own understanding. So that's why I wanted to connect these two together, Arto Lindsay and Iwao.
It was beautifully done, and it was abrupt and blunt, and it was great. And we have another question. Are there any changes to solitary confinement in Canada or Japan or globally that you're aware of? And I think this is for both of you.
Maybe James, do you want to go first?
Sure. Well, I know in Canada that there was a recent judgment against Corrections Canada for $20 million for the misuse of solitary confinement. And following that, Corrections has been ordered to not to use solitary confinement. They've changed the wording to call it structured intervention units. And essentially it's the same thing with a couple of different changes. Probably the most significant is that prisoners must get 4 hours of meaningful contact is the wording in the law. And unfortunately, there still exists the, I guess what you'd call the, like there's problems come up with short staff and that can't be avoided. And so there's excuses within these laws still that allow the continuation of solitary confinement. And now, unfortunately, as I mentioned before, we've been hit with this COVID circumstance, and that has also increased the use of solitary confinement. So legally, it's been limited to what it once was, but practically it still continues to operate very much the same as it always has, unfortunately.
And unfortunately, Japan is also similar in that case. Like especially now with the COVID, there have been a lot of what do you call the people on exile or immigrants coming to Japan, and then they were unlawfully detained, and then they were put in the solitary confinement. So there's a lot of unfortunate things happening in Japan now. Maybe, yeah.
I really appreciated how at the beginning of the film, Iwao said that in like the future, in a world, in a great world, there would be no capital punishment. And that's something as a prison abolitionist I really identify with. And so were there any other sort of like threads around like abolition or things that came out of that film, or did you know anything about prisons before working on this film? And was that kind of a central politic that you also had going into making the film?
Actually, like it wasn't really, I wasn't, you know, like I wasn't making film to advocate for the abolishing death penalty, but it just came to me naturally, like from Iwao's belief. And then Japan, yes, it's still, Japan still has a death penalty. And I think I'm hoping that this film and a couple other films that's also dealing with about the solitary confinement and the death penalty, like hopefully we can change the way things are in Japan.
And James, is there anything else that you wanted to add about the film that you loved or appreciated, or threads that came out that kind of related to your life?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've mentioned most of it. I'm really appreciative that Hiroshi made this film, and I think it's amazing, especially has been said already with the music seemed to fit so well with that kind of break in reality that Iwao was experiencing and still is experiencing today. And I don't know if we've mentioned that he started going for a walk after you left. and that's a part of his routine now. It's almost like a job. He just walks for 8 hours every day. Yeah, it's funny. I can think of lots of different kind of quirks and things that people do in the course of being confined and separated from society, and these behaviors that come out that people would think is odd, but really these things are much less odd, I think, than isolating a human being from the rest of society for 48 years. Like, there is nothing more strange for a society than that. So thank you for making this movie. I really loved it, and I look forward to your next one.
And for Hiroshi, we have another question. How is Iwao doing now?
He's doing great. So I always go see him like every year. I go back to Japan every year, like maybe winter or summer. So every time I go back, I go say hello to him. And he's pretty much the same. He takes a walk every single day for about 8 hours. And I think maybe I should mention this because someone from the caretaker of the prison has learned about his walking, taking a walk. And then he said while he was in solitary, he was also walking back and forth in the room. So in some ways, he is taking a walk in the city of Hamamatsu. At the same time, it's like an extension of his cell because he's always doing the same route. So I thought that was very, very interesting because in some ways, like 48 years of being confined in a small space and these things, they don't go away in 1-2 years. It's so molded in his mind and in his body that it doesn't go away like just because he's out for 2 years, 3 years. He's well. He had a little bit of like he fell at one time by taking a walk, so he scratched his knee, and then he also eats too much candies, so he's getting a little bit of like what do you call like eating sugar too much and diabetic. So other than that, he eats well and he talks a lot. And recently I talked to him, and his what do you call the grammatical structure or his language structure is the same. He had a new content because I think he's now out and then watches TV, hears things. So he inserts things that he learned, and then however the way he talks is pretty much the same. So I was like, oh, it's a new words, but at the same time, like it was very familiar to me.
And another participant wants to know, are you working on any other films right now? And can you tell us about any upcoming projects that you have? Yes,
so in 2018, I went to Mexico and made a film about a poet, Jose Luis Rico, who has written a book of poetry about his family and friends who kind of like experienced the drug war in the 90s. So the poems are like a memoir. So basically, I organized this film crew and then reenacted some of his like encounters with his family and then reading a poetry. So this documentary film is called Ketan Leho, which is like how far am I? It's out right now. It's like I'm sending it to festival. So, and then I'm also making a film about Okinawa. A photographer from Okinawa, female photographer, who used to work at a bar that served Black GIs in the 70s, because at the time in Okinawa with the American military base, they used to have entertainment places like bars and strip bars and places for white soldiers and then black soldiers because of they used to fight and everything. So I'm making a documentary about this woman's photo book called Akabana, and she was working at the strip bar, and then she was taking picture of the boys who come there and the women who were working there. This is their sort of like a little bit sexy life, and her testimony about her experience then.
That sounds amazing. And we have another question. So they say, I really like that you added the audio interview with the sanitary worker from the prison in the film. Why did you decide to include that?
Oh, because the testimony was so interesting. Because sometimes Iwao would say one thing, like he was saying he kept a lot of candies in his cell and then ate it all the time, and then he didn't even eat the food that they provide. But at the same time, like when Hideko told me that's really not the case. So he was eating everything all the time, and then he didn't have candies in cells. So I wanted to also show a little bit of the difference of opinion. And in that way, I thought the testimony was useful.
Because he mentioned having candies available in the prison. Did he have candies that were available to him?
It may have been like a few times where when he has visitors, and then they would give him candies and things, but not all the time. It's not provided as a food.
Mm-hmm. Interesting differences in his sort of like depiction, and then the testimonies from the other workers.
Yeah.
I think we are out of questions. And so I'd like to just say thank you to both of my participants. James, thank you very much. And Hiroshi, thank you so much for making an amazing, beautiful film and for documenting mental health and prison psychosis in such an incredible way, and for bringing that to people's screens. And I don't know, is there anything else that we can add? I'd like to thank the ASL interpreters and anyone else who was here. Kat, thank you so much. And then everyone that did tech, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I would just love to quickly jump in and reiterate, thank you so much to Hiroshi, to James and Amina for your time and your insights. And also to our interpreter, Ryan, our captioner, Don, and Kat, our active listener. And I just wanted to say, it was such an honor to meet you, Hiroshi, in Jakarta at the Archipel Documentary Festival and see this film. And on behalf of the Film Programming Committee, we're just so honored that you shared the film with Rendezvous with Madness. And its first festival screening in North America. We're really, really flattered. It's such a powerful and important film and subject. And a reminder to the audience that the Rendezvous with Madness continues for 7 more days. So there's a lot of films, performances, workshops, a virtual tour of our exhibition. Everything's online, everything is free or pay what you can. So we hope that you'll check out the website for more films throughout the week. And thank you all again for your time and your contributions tonight.
Thank you.